Welcome back to Last Words on the Pit. This week we're talking band merch. Are you sick of seeing Zoomers co-opt your favorite municipal waste shirt without ever doing a stage dive? Well, then this is the show for you. I'm one of your co-hosts, Coyle from the band Bad Wolves and host of the X-Men podcast.
Screw your Zoomers. I'm Zeena Koda, host of Everything's Political, and I'm a violator of that policy for sure.
I'm Katy Irizarry of Season of Miss, Loudwire, and Outburn, among other things, and I'm ready to get into it.
We're starting with a very simple question. Band t-shirt etiquette, you're going to a show. Can you wear a shirt for the band you're going to see?
I gotta say, it's a tough one, right? Because if the shirt's fire, why not wear it?
I feel like this is something, I don't know where this rule came from. Like, does anyone even know where this rule came from that you cannot wear the shirt of the band you're going to see? Because I feel like it's just some arbitrary rule that I've just been following. And I'm like, but why? Where did this come from?
I'll tell you the rule happened essentially, I'm going to presume it happened somewhere during the punk rock evolution into the hardcore scene, because this is a cultural thing, okay? The first show I ever went to, Pantera, White Zombie, Deftones, my brother and I both wore our Pantera shirts we bought down in Wildwood, and we're just sitting there smiling. And when you're a metal fan, I think metal fans, they're not trying to be cool. They're there to kind of bask in the fandom. And part of being a super fan and being a nerd is being so into it, you don't care about people judging you. You're just like, I love this thing and I want to express how much I love it. Then when you get into the punk and hardcore scene, those are like cool people. They're the people like smoking cigarettes, like against the wall and like being ironic and being detached. And so I learned the etiquette of not wearing the shirt of the band you're going to see from the hardcore scene.
Because you wanted to be cool.
Well, no, it was just you wanted to blend in with that culture, which is cool. Those people saw themselves as cooler than cheesy metalheads who are all wearing the shirt of the band they're going to see.
Okay, well, I got news for you. You're all nerds, all right?
I know.
Self-included. Having metal be such an accessible genre, like, you don't really know the embarrassment of like when you go to the merch table and you're wearing the merch and the band is slinging the merch and you just look like some weird super fan, you know, because let's face it, in our genre, unless you're like, you know, Metallica or Ghost or something like that, bands are so accessible. They're working the merch tables. They're having a beer at the same bar that you're having a beer at. You don't have to work in the music industry or be like one of us. Like, bands are 9 times out of 10 super accessible. So like, I feel like a weirdo when I'm like running into a band and I'm like, oh, that's weird. I'm wearing a Sepultura shirt and Derek Green is here. This is uncomfortable, you know?
I think the exception is kids, right? Because I think it's adorable when you see a kid, like a young kid, whether they're like a preteen or a child wearing like the band shirt that they're there to see. Like, I find it almost kind of endearing, right? Because it really shows like they're putting themselves out there as a metal fan and they're like proud of that thing. So I think that's probably one of the only times you kind of like let them have the pass. But I really do think that in the last few years, it's become a little bit less stigmatized. And maybe like back in the day, it was very true with a V. But now it feels like people are less critical of those kind of things unless you're a complete cornball wearing like the shirt, the hoodie, the jacket, the hat, like all of the pieces together. It feels like you can kind of get away with it a little bit more, no?
Listen, I'm just gonna cut it real quick. All right. Ooh. You guys gotta understand your own perspective. You guys are big city, metropolitan ladies who existed during like the hipster era. Okay. And you can't help but be affected by that. You're involved in the industry, you're behind the scenes. You guys are kind of cool. You don't think you're cool, we kind of cool, okay? I've been on tour.
Okay, Grandpa.
Hold on, no. I've been on tour with metal bands for 20 years, okay? And once you start playing with big bands, people not only come wearing the shirt, they go to the show and buy the shirt at the merch stand and put the shirt on. It is the most common thing. To me, the whole idea of, well, I'm not going to wear the shirt because yes, you're trying to be cool. You're actually, if you're a fan of a band and you're like, I'm not going to wear the shirt. You're basically just saying you don't want to admit that you're a fan, or you're like, I don't want to be like those people. Like, what? Just be a fan. Like, there's nothing wrong with it, and it's the most common thing. But yes, when you go to a show in a different scene, they don't do that. But in mainstream, not even mainstream, just if you go to like a Dimmu Borgir show or a Cannibal Corpse show, you're going to see a bunch of people wearing Cannibal Corpse shirts there and Dimmu Borgir shirts. And that's pretty underground. And I think it's fairly common. So there's that. Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Doc, I'm sorry, but there is nothing lamer than when someone goes to the merch table and right then and there puts it on. Like, that's great that you're that excited about this piece of merchandise, but like, at least wait till like you've been in the pit for a little bit and get that first shirt.
But if half the crowd's doing it, and those are the key fans, those are the reason why the band even has a right to exist, is that there's people that are that excited about it. And so all the biggest fans are the lamest people. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm saying you're saying I'm not like those geeks. I don't do what they do. I do something a little different. You guys are not seeing this. I don't know. Zeena, am I putting you in the same category as Katy?
Listen, I have style, okay? And I like to get laid, unlike some people who just go to the merch table and put their little shirt on right away.
Do you think anyone would not lay you, or either because of the shirt you were wearing? Come on. You don't met men. Have you met men before?
Doc brings up a good point. Like, you could literally show up in a burlap sack and like.
That's right. There's some ass under that sack. I'm telling you, just look for the right angle. You can tell. You see the shadow.
Do tell us about touring in the Midwest. Thank you.
If you go to a Suicidal show, not only are people wearing the shirt, they kind of dress like the band, right? They're wearing the caps and they've got the bandanas and they've got the shorts, and it's a whole thing. And that, I think, goes to anything, right? If you went to like a Madonna show in 1986, half the girls were dressed like Madonna, which is almost a further extension, right? It almost goes into like that cosplay element of.
Can I just say that is an excellent point about people mimicking the bands, because I think one of the funniest and greatest things I ever saw was one of Mike Portnoy's many bands, like the Winery Dogs or something at like, I don't know, like BB King.
Wow.
And there was literally 15 to 20 dudes in the audience of all ages with blue beards, because Mike Portnoy has a blue beard. Like, that's a real thing. And you're right. Like, of course, I am that fangirl. I just don't want people to see I'm that level of fangirl. Because like I said, you know what? You're onto something here, Doc. I want to maintain a level of cool. Not that I want to try hard, but I also, want to hide my inner nerd is more like it. Does that make sense?
Coolness defined is essentially detachment. Part of being cool is either not caring or pretending you don't care, right? And being a super fan is the exact opposite of that. And I've gone through many levels of that and evolutions. And as I've gotten older, I've just learned to kind of embrace the stuff I love, right? So now it's like, I'm going to see Metallica, I'm going to see Guns N' Roses. I'll wear a Guns N' Roses shirt because I'm like expressing my fandom and being like, and I'm the dude. And I've had this experience going to see both bands and I'm singing every word. And, sometimes I get hooked up, I'll be in the front. Because I get, I know people to know people to know people.
He's so cool.
I'll be singing all the words. I'll be looking around. I'm like, these don't know the words. They ain't a real fan like Doc Coyle. And I start feeling myself, start puffing my chest up. Nah.
I have a question for you guys. What about an artist or a hip hop artist that wears a shirt of an artist that you think that they probably don't know about? What's your thoughts on that?
Free marketing. Love it. Want more of it. Don't care if you don't listen to this band, because some kid out there is saying, you know what? Even again, at the end of the day, they're buying merch, they're spending money. And some other kid out there might, again, like see it and see Kanye in a Suicidal Tendencies jacket and say, that looks cool. I'm going to buy a Suicidal Tendencies hat. Maybe they'll take it a step further and say, I'm going to listen to Suicidal Tendencies. I think we just talked about Rihanna wearing like a Crocus shirt. First of all, she's legit a fan. And, so I think it's also kind of messed up to throw these assumptions around. Like, I think it is pretty safe to assume that like the Kardashians don't listen to Slayer. But at the same time, there's actually been articles in like CNN or like CNBC and stuff like that about how Slayer merch sales spiked after the Kardashians were photographed in their merch. So I'm here for it, because these bands, our people aren't spending money on it, then who's gonna?
Well, I love this topic because I think there's just so much depth there. So you have one element coming from the metal culture, in a sense, if you go back to the mid 80s, was all about this idea about rooting out posers, right? People who were not into it as much as you, or they were kind of faking it, or last week they were wearing a White Snake shirt and this week they're wearing an Exodus shirt. So they're a poser because they didn't kind of earn their stripes to a certain degree. There's this real emphasis on paying your dues. And what's kind of evolved with that, and I brought up hipster culture before, but I think it's really important because a lot of people use that term from a derogative standpoint. And the way I'm using it is basically to say that as millennials kind of aged, the way they looked at it is that they could kind of pick from the smorgasbord of culture and say, oh, I'm gonna wear a cowboy hat, and then I'm gonna have a Pixies shirt, and then I'm gonna wear like a leather jacket, and they're just kind of be this thing where they don't really see themselves as being in one lane. And so they don't really care. A lot of it is actually coming from their stylists. So they're working with the stylist, and the stylist will throw a municipal waste shirt on them, and they don't even really think much of it. They're just kind of like going with whatever is cool. And I remember I was listening to one podcast, and the basketball player Kevin Durant was on there, and the interviewer asked him if he knew who the Smiths were, because he was wearing a Smith shirt, and he was like, "Nah, I don't know what that is." But he was almost a little annoyed that he was even asked, because he's like, "Why are you messing with me? Why can't I just wear the shirt?" You know.
Yeah, I feel like I did hear about that, or it happened in another capacity where there was someone else like wearing a shirt. Was it like
probably Travis Scott in the Pantera shirt?
Yeah, or it might have been Billie Eilish. Like, was that how that whole Van Halen thing came about? Where for some reason she was asked about Van Halen. I don't really know why. So like, am I maybe conflating the two things? Like, I feel like that happened, and that was also a big thing where people were so outraged that this girl didn't know who Van Halen was. It's like, first of all, I appreciate the honesty. Like, I'd rather someone tell me they don't know who Van Halen is than lie to my face and tell me they do know who Van Halen is. And second of all, she gave that band more publicity to, you know, young kids and teens and zennials than Van Halen themselves are doing.
No, I have a lot of strong thoughts on this too. I actually wrote an article a few years ago. God, it feels like an eternity ago, for Up Rocks about this.
I think I read that article.
Yeah, it was a while ago. You know, in the Metallica boom, even though Doc's ripping off the Metallica logo right now with his personal Doc Coyle logo, but he can have it. He knows every word to every song, so he's good. You're absolutely right, Katy. Like, it's really important for a new generation to get exposure to these bands, that they existed, the style. And Doc, you're even more right in saying that the stylists are basically the ones picking them out, because I remember a specific instance. I've worked in metal and hip hop in my music career. And I put out an album called Championships for Meek Mill. And Meek Mill was wearing a Megadeth t-shirt. And one of my good friends, which you guys all know, was actually working managing Dave at the time.
Yeah.
So I literally like snuck up and I took a photo. I was like, send this to Dave, let Dave know. Of course he has no clue. Like, he doesn't care who Meek Mill is, right? But this is an event that's being, you know, he's sitting next to Rick Ross. He's like being photographed in this Megadeth t-shirt. And that's probably the most exposure in mainstream media than other rappers that love Megadeth t-shirts out of nowhere, for sure. That Megadeth has gotten, right? And, you know, when I checked in with his friend, he was like, yeah, you know, he loves it because it's great to see his name in the mainstream, like, 30 years later, right? Again, who made the rule that every single thing that you wear, you have to know every nuance of the history of it, right? Like, sometimes fashion is fashion, and it's great to expose it to a different audience.
As someone who is really into wearing t-shirts that are cool, that reflect kind of the things I like, it is kind of a weird thing if someone's wearing a shirt, especially a deep cut shirt like that, like, oh man, I love that album. They're like, who? What? Like, if you were
tragic.
Like, would you guys wear the shirt of a band you've never heard, but you just thought the shirt was cool?
No.
Yeah.
I love that.
If it fits over my boobs, I'm definitely going to give it a try.
Well, that has been our show this week on Last Words. My name is Doc Coyle. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Doc Coyle. Zeena, where can the people find you?
I keep it super simple, at Zeena Koda 2 E's on all social platforms. Katy, where can we find you?
Merciful Kate on Instagram and Twitter.
You can follow us on all platforms at We Are The Pit on social media. If you like what you saw, please go check out our podcast. anywhere where you get podcasts. For having fun, go over and check out the podcast every Thursday.